Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light
Hey River Church, good morning. Pastor Mark with you. So glad to be back and sharing this message with you. How you doing, everybody? Hope it's been a great beginning of your fall so far, and so glad that you've joined us here online for our online worship experience. Hey, would you click on this, like it, subscribe, whatever, share it, whatever works for you, and sharing this with somebody. It has never been easier to share an invitation to church or to share a message that somebody needs to hear. So this is real simple. Do that, and I'd love to have you be a part of that. Hey, we are in the last week of our series called Fresh Op, and this is week 5, last one, and we're finishing up this series, which has been all about seizing the opportunities that God gives us as individuals and as a church. And I hope you've been coming along for the ride for that. If you haven't, go back and watch some of the old ones, or catch us online or catch us in person at the church at 11 o'clock on Sundays. We'd love to have you. But today is the last part of that series. So let me start with a question today. Have you ever had an amazing opportunity come into your life that emerged out of something very difficult, or emerged out of something that was very challenging, or even emerged out of some pain in your life? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, maybe you had this amazing opportunity that came out of a difficult time in your life, or a challenging or pain, like a job loss, like you lost your job and you thought this is the worst possible thing. But what actually emerged was this incredible opportunity to do something different. Or maybe it was a breakup in a relationship, and because of that breakup, you found the love of your life. Or maybe an unexpected move. You had to move your family, and you thought this was going to be the worst thing, but you found that it ended up being the best thing. Or maybe it could have even been a death of a friend or a family member. And out of that, sad as that is, emerged an opportunity that you would have never seen or had before. This series has been all about opportunities, and today that's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at opportunities that emerge and come about because of some very difficult things. So we've been using the book of Acts as our guide through this series. In Acts chapter 7, Luke writes to us about the stoning of what's considered the first martyr of the church, Stephen. And so Stephen is killed for his faith in Jesus. And it is out of that stoning, and by the way, the person we know as the Apostle Paul, Saul, was there, and it says he was approving of what happened to Stephen. And we've looked at Paul's transformation throughout the scripture, throughout this series and throughout the scripture, and he was there on that day. And so Stephen dies, and then this is what it says at the beginning of chapter 8. It says, on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them into prison. A couple things there. Did you notice this? The church is all still in Jerusalem where Stephen dies. But because of his death and because of the persecution against the church, they take the message to Judea and Samaria, surrounding areas. Now, that might sound familiar to you because Jesus actually told them a short time before that they were called to take the gospel, called to take the message of Jesus to Judea and Samaria. But guess what? They didn't do it. They didn't do it. It took something bad to get them to go and do what Jesus had called them to do. It took this persecution breaking out to finally get them out and to scatter them and to take the gospel to new places like Samaria, which, if you know your history, the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along. And so it's a big deal that in chapter 8, Philip, who's going to be a main person in our story today, takes the gospel to Samaria and sees amazing transformation in the life of people in chapter 8. But it is that persecution, that difficult thing, that moves them with a fresh message to Samaria, where Jesus told them to go all along. And so they do ministry in Samaria, and Philip is there. Philip is one of the people that is commissioned by the church, who was along with Stephen. And so he is now out in ministry, headed out into different areas. So God's doing new things. God's doing new things in the midst of what, for the church, looks like a very, very dark time. Now remember, we've been looking at the book of Isaiah. And in the book of Isaiah, kind of this theme verse that we've had for this fresh opportunities is in Isaiah 43:19, where God says to Isaiah, "Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Can you see it? Can you see that I'm doing new things?" And then he says this, "I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers or streams in the desert or the wasteland." God's promise that he's always doing new things, that he's making a way for people in the wilderness, and that he's going to bring rivers into the desert. That symbolizes new life, life into our deserts, life into our wastelands. And literally the story we're about to look at in Acts chapter 8 actually involves a desert, and actually involves God making a way for one person to experience new life. So now in Acts chapter 8, we're going to look at this story that involves Philip, involves a desert, and it involves God really making a stream in the desert, and actually even through a passage out of the book of Isaiah. So in Acts chapter 8, verse 26, this is what it tells us. "Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, 'Go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza.'" There were two roads that went from Jerusalem to Gaza. Gaza is down south of Jerusalem towards Egypt. And so there were two roads. The desert road was the road less traveled. And so this is where God sends him. God sends Philip on the road less traveled. He says, "Go down from Jerusalem to Gaza, the desert road." So he started out, and on his way, he met an Ethiopian eunuch. So a man from Ethiopia, who's a eunuch. That means we're about to find out he serves in the queen's court. And so a eunuch was a person who, how do you put this delicately, had lost certain things so they could not do certain things with the queen. That's what a eunuch is. So you figure it out, but that's what it is. And so this man is a high official in the queen's court. It says he was in charge. He was an important official in charge of all the treasury of the Kandake, which means queen of the Ethiopians. Or some people translate this Candace. That's another way to say that. This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home was sitting in his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. So this tells us a whole lot. There's a whole lot here. And in this passage, we find out that Philip is ready to go. He's ready to go. He is willing. His spirit is willing. When the Spirit of God says, go to the desert, go to this road south of Jerusalem, he is ready to go. His spirit is willing. His emotional, his ministry bags are packed. He's excited. He's ready to go, and he listens to the Spirit of God. And what we see here as the Ethiopian was in Jerusalem to worship. So what this is a man who has either converted to Judaism or is seeking God through the Jewish religion. And so he has gone to Jerusalem, to the temple, to worship. So what we have to see right here is Philip is ready to go. He's willing. But the other thing we need to see is that God is already at work, that God is way ahead of Philip already. God's already working. God's already working in the life of this person. God is already ahead of us, doing things, preparing the way for us. Remember that passage from Isaiah? I will prepare a way in the wilderness. I will make streams in the desert, in the wasteland. I will make rivers of life where it seems like there could be no life. God is already doing all of this ahead of us. And then it goes on in verse 29. It says, the Spirit told Philip, go, Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. Go and stay near it. Then Philip ran up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you are reading? Philip asked him. You know, this is a really, really cool moment. So you can imagine this Ethiopian is sitting in his chariot reading the scroll of Isaiah. The Spirit of God tells him, move towards this man. Put yourself close to this man. See, this next part in this passage is all about proximity, and it's all about preparedness. It's all about proximity and preparedness. The Spirit of God calls Philip to move towards a person who is searching for Christ, is searching for God. He tells him to move towards him, that's where he needs it. That's the same for us. God calls us to be in proximity with people who are seeking, with people who are unbelievers, and also to be prepared, The scripture in 1 Peter says it this way. It says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have in you, but do this with gentleness and respect. So Philip slides up next to the chariot, and he says to him, do you understand what you're reading? I love the curiosity. I love as he hears the words of Isaiah read, and he sees this man that Philip is curious, that Philip wants to have a conversation with this man. And we need to be the same. Like, are you curious about people? Like, do you see people and you want to get to know them? You see them and you're curious about them. You're excited to hear about their life, or you're excited to get to know them, or to see what's going on. That you're just curious with people. We need to be that way. And then notice this, that Philip says this. He says, hey, do you understand what you're reading? Philip asked him, do you understand it? Like, we need to train. We need to be prepared, as the scripture says, to share what we know. But if we don't know it, we can't share it. So he's hearing him read the book of Isaiah, and he says, do you understand what you're reading? Do you understand? I mean, if you don't understand as a follower of Christ, how would you have done in this moment? How would you have explained what was happening in this moment? Because you couldn't if you're not prepared. The scripture tells us to be prepared. We should be curious. We should be close in proximity to unbelievers. We should have a heart for people if we're going to seize these opportunities that come our way. And so far we know Philip's excited. Philip has heard the call of God. He's close and he's prepared and he's ready to go. And this is what as the story continues in verse 31, he says, do you understand what you're reading? How can I? He said, unless someone explains it to me. So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. And this is the passage of scripture the eunuch was reading, which is out of the scroll of Isaiah. He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shears, it's silent. So he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth. And the eunuch asked Philip, tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about? Himself or someone else? Then Philip began with that very passage of scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. Now, did you notice this here? The Ethiopian invited Philip into the conversation. And this is an open door. He gives Philip this open door and says, hey, I need someone to explain this to me. He gives him the big, huge, wide, it's like this tunnel down here. Like, he gives him this huge, wide open space to say, walk into it. Notice that this is not a forced entry. Philip's not forcing anything on him. He's being invited. He's being invited into the space. And you know what would have been the real tragedy in this moment? If the Ethiopian would have said to Philip, hey, can you explain this all to me? And he would have just passed. He would have just passed. He would have passed on that moment. But we so often do that. We pass on these moments that are open doors. People give us open doors to walk through, and we just literally pass them by. And we let them go and never step through those open doors. We never do what God calls us to step through these open doors, to share the message of Christ with others. I want you to watch this. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up the message and to wrap up this story and this passage of Scripture. So we'll be right back.
Look around you. There's so much work to do. This world is in no condition for us to simply sit back and watch. There is a tangible, desperate need for Jesus. A glimpse of hope in the midst of hopelessness. Jesus experienced this. He saw it firsthand. The need broke his heart and filled him with compassion. He turned to his disciples and said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few." This alone should stir our hearts. It's a calling to make a difference, to share the truth of the gospel, to be a light in the darkness, to be the church. It's time for us to look beyond ourselves, to turn our focus to the field, to answer the call and passionately share the love of Jesus. This is our mandate. This is our mission. Are you ready to do the work?
So Philip started with where the eunuch was. He was reading the scroll of Isaiah, and that scripture that we looked at right before the video said he started there and he began to tell him about Jesus. And he told him how Jesus had died for him. He told him how he was crucified, how he rose from the dead. And he started with where the Ethiopian was. And as we continue in that story, we've changed locations. We're down here by the beautiful Ohio River with the Swickley Bridge in the background, because the next part of this passage involves a river. And it says, as they traveled along, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized?" And he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Yeah, we don't know what happened with Philip there at the end. Nobody quite knows how he just pulls a disappearing act there. But somehow the Spirit ushers him away, and the eunuch doesn't see him anymore, but he goes on his way rejoicing. But did you notice that it said as they traveled along? And so he shares his faith, he shares Christ with this eunuch, and then he walks with him and travels with him in the chariot together. See, Philip knew and understood that this is a journey, not a job. Like, people aren't projects, people aren't a job. We're called to journey with them. Philip shared his faith with him, and this man is interested, and this man is coming to faith, and this man is seeking Christ, and he wants to be baptized, because Philip didn't just see him as a drive-by evangelism or drive-by share my faith with Christ and then move on. He journeyed with the man. He realized he was on a journey with them. It wasn't just a job. And this man is baptized, and his whole life changes. He's rejoicing. And do you realize that this man took the gospel to Ethiopia? I mean, the Coptic Christians today draw their heritage all the way back to this man who was in the Queen's court. And Christianity has had a foothold in Ethiopia ever since this moment, this opportunity that wasn't missed, this opportunity that was taken in such a beautiful way. You know, I don't know about you, but there's something that just feels so right about this story, this encounter, how faith is exchanged here, how the faith is shared with another person. There's just an easiness about it in this story. I like to say it's kind of easy like Sunday morning, like that song. There's just an ease to it. There's almost like a breeziness to this encounter between these men. It kind of feels like it's just the Spirit moving. And what did Jesus say to Nicodemus? He said, the Spirit moves and blows like the wind wherever it wants to. And this story kind of feels like that. It feels like that is happening. What is so right about this story when it comes to sharing our faith and reaching out to our world, being a fresh witness in the world, taking those opportunities to share our faith with others? What feels so right about this? Well, it's Spirit-led, it's not rehearsed. It's not manipulative, it's very humble. It's not pushy. Philip's not pushy. It's respectful and it's gentle. It meets people where they are. It's a reading of the room too, or should we say the reading of the chariot. Like, Philip could read what was going on, and he had the emotional intelligence to see what was happening here and to see where he should go and how he should navigate this conversation with this man. It was flexible. It was a following of the Spirit. It was a very humble boldness. And Philip had a confidence. He knew Christ. He knew what Jesus had done. And there was a confidence in that. Now, this story is just such a guide for us in the year 2021 of how we can share our faith with others. If we do it like this, I think this is where God is calling us to be, to in our witness for Him. I don't believe He's calling us to go door to door and cold call people and just get in people's faces. I think He's looking for people who are willing to listen to the Spirit of God and see where God is already ahead of us and where He's working, and just catch up with Him and just follow where the wind blows. The Spirit blows us through conversations and into places that maybe we never thought we'd go. Years ago, I heard this great story. I hope I don't butcher it here, but I heard this great story about a young seminarian who had trained in evangelism, and he knew all the right things to say, and he had his formulas down, and here's what you take people through, and here's how you share this, and here's what to say, and here's what to not say. And so one day he goes out to share the gospel door to door, and he goes to the projects in the city he was in. And he goes to this door, the first door he goes to, and he knocks on the door. And this lady opens the door. She's smoking a cigarette with a baby on her hip. And she says, "Yeah, what do you want?" And he goes, "I want to share Jesus with you. I want to talk to you about Jesus." And she slams the door in his face. But he had the emotional intelligence. And he realized a couple things that he had seen there. And so he goes to the store and he comes back and he knocks on the door again. And as the door swings open, the same lady, baby on her hip, smoking a cigarette, says, "What do you want?" But this time he's standing there with a big pack of diapers and a carton of cigarettes. And he's like, "Can I come in?" And he comes in, and later in that day, he comes back to the seminary and they say, "How did your day go?" And he goes, "Well, it went unlike I ever thought it would go." He said, "I spent my entire day holding a baby, changing diapers, and smoking for Jesus. And I got to share the love of Christ with this woman." He didn't smoke. He'd never changed diapers before. But he said, that's what I did, because he read the room, because he saw where the Spirit was leading. I'm not telling you to go out and smoke, by the way. But that's, you get the point. He just listened to the Spirit. He listened to God's leading, and he got to lead this woman to a relationship with Jesus Christ. This is what I think God has called us to. I'm not to smoking. Again, remember that. But I think you get the point. That this is where, if we are willing to listen to the Spirit of God lead us. You know, ask yourself this question. What can God do with a Spirit-led, available, prepared follower? What can God do? What can God do with a person who's listening to the Spirit, available, saying, "Lord, here am I. Where do you want me to go? You want me to go the desert road? I'll go there. Do you want me to go to the project and sit with somebody and change diapers and smoke cigarettes in order to share the love of Jesus?" Someone who's prepared, someone who knows the Scripture, somebody who knows and is ready to share what they know about Jesus, is prepared in their heart, and someone who's just following Jesus. What can God do with somebody like that? He can do anything. He can do anything with someone like that. I don't know about you, but I want to have these kind of conversations that Philip has with the Ethiopian. I wish I could have that conversation with people every single day. Would you pray for that? Would you pray that God would give you that conversation every single day? That you would have those kind of conversations with people every day of your life? That's my hope in my life. I love having these kind of conversations with people. I want fresh opportunities every day. I hope you do too. We're going to close this series and close this message out with a video I've already showed you. It's a video I showed you in the first week. I love this video. It moves me. And I told you 5 weeks ago why it moves me. Starts out, it's kind of abstract. It's this conversation between this woman and this guy, and you think they're talking about their relationship, but they're not. And she says, will you stay? He goes, "I don't know, I tried and I failed and it's too hard." And they're really talking about the city, the people of the city, about staying and reaching them and loving them and being a fresh witness in their life. He's like, I'm not sure I can do it. And then she says to him, "What do you see?" And he looks around and this is what I see, and it's really difficult. And she asks him, "Do you think this is all about you?" And he says, "Well, who would it be about?" And then there's all these images of people. All people who, those are one fresh opportunity after another. I hope as you watch this, you will think about the people that you encounter every day. Do you see them as fresh opportunities to share the love of Christ? Are you curious about them? Are you curious about their lives, whether they never come to believe what you believe or not? Are you curious about them? Could you love them? Could you ask them about their life? Watch this video. Thanks for being with us through this whole series. I pray as a church that we'll take advantage of every fresh opportunity that God brings to us. See you soon.
So, will you stay?
I tried.
It's too hard.
Tell me what you see.
It's expensive. Busy. Lonely.
Is that all? I understand.
So why would I stay?
You think this is all about you?
Who else?
So, will you stay?
I tried. I don't know how.